Hi everybody, it's Christopher and welcome to Life's Not Over, It Just Looks Different on YouTube. It's not uncommon through various forms of media, whether it's books, magazines, newspapers, or YouTube videos, to find stories from people with sight loss showing how they get things done in their day-to-day life differently than people with full eyesight do. And it's also not uncommon to find stories through those same forms of media from people with sight loss who share adventures that they've had where things didn't go quite as planned. Maybe they got turned upside down a couple of times. Maybe they went through the spin cycle in the washing machine once or twice, but they came out of it alive, and here they are able to tell their story. What you don't hear about very often is people talking about there being advantages to poor eyesight. Something I learned very early on in my sight loss days as an advantage is I would never again hear the question, do I look fat in this? Another person who's found the advantages to poor eyesight is Ken Brandt, the author of Positive Vision, Enjoying the Adventures and Advantages of Poor Eyesight. I caught up with Ken. He was kind enough to give me some of his time for a video link from his home in Melbourne, Australia, and here's our conversation. So Ken, I really want to thank you for giving me some time to talk to you about your book. As I was telling you sort of before we started recording, I've been through it twice. And enjoyed all the bad jokes, probably just as much the second time as I did the first time. And I love a good corny joke. And I think I think I drove my wife a little bit crazy when I recited them all back to her. But one of the questions I want to ask you, just right from the beginning, having done this myself, I know that writing a book is a really big undertaking. So kind of what prompted you to want to put this all together and put your story out there?
Well, first, thanks very much for having me on board here and for reading my book and all those kind thoughts. I really appreciate it. In answer to your first question, I really had not thought about writing a book for the vast majority of my life. And then I retired. And I had a whole bunch of stories that people liked hearing over coffee or over beers or just talking that, people thought were funny and liked. And I thought, I don't know, maybe I should write them all down. Because many people thought they were funny and some people thought they might be helpful to others who have poor vision. So I thought about that. And then I thought, well, while I do it, I might as well add in a bunch of thoughts I had on the advantages of poor eyesight, which is not a topic I've never really heard that discussed. But I thought, that's worth discussing. Good eyesight, absolutely better than poor eyesight. I've had a roller coaster of vision improvements and degradations throughout my life. Different 6 eye operations, and my vision's gone up and down and up and down, and I've been legally blind for a big chunk of my life. Not right now, but very, very grateful for the vision I have, and have an interesting perspective having so much variety in my vision over my lifetime. I thought, let me just throw all that in a book and see what happens. So that's what I did. I would not have done it earlier because I thought it would be bad for my career, and I didn't want to discuss vision like basically ever growing up or as a kid or as somebody with a job, because I thought, all right, this is, I'm just going to get a bunch of questions and people will feel bad, and I'll be embarrassed, and might have a loss of career opportunity. So all of those things stopped me. But after retiring, I said, I don't care about any of those things. Let me just write it down and see if people like it. And so far, so good.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been, like I said, I thought it was a great read. I really enjoyed it. Even second time through, I still laughed at all the jokes. And I love one of the first parts that you put in there. One of the first things that caught my attention was you talked about sort of the 3 things that really, contributed to your adventurous spirit, being genetics, encouragement, and poor eyesight. Now, I think the book is pretty clear on the third one, but I'm hoping you can expand a little bit more for me on those first 2 things, the genetics and the encouragement.
Sure. Well, genetics, just I've got some ancestors who I think were pretty brave and adventurous. My great-great-grandmother, when she was 13, went from Ireland to Canada by herself on in steerage class on a sailing ship to go be an indentured servant in Canada. She didn't like that. She ran away, moved to Boston, Massachusetts in the U.S. All of this while she was like 13 and 14 or 16 or something. And then she married this sea captain, and they went for a honeymoon from Boston to Yellowstone National Park. Now, this was a long time ago. This was before cars and, in the, way back. And so they went by horseback. It took them a year to get there and go back. So I think of that as pretty adventurous. My grandfathers and my father both won medals for bravery in different wars for the U.S. And I think of that as being pretty brave and adventurous. So that's and my mother, although she denies it completely, I think has been very adventurous also. So those are the sort of genetic things where it might, possibly come from.
I'd love to hear more about the encouragement. Is that encouragement from friends, family, or who were the big encouragers?
Well, I think my family, where I was very lucky, and if I talk to other people with very poor vision, they were maybe sort of protected or not allowed to go and do things. And I had a sort of a very different upbringing where I was encouraged to do whatever I wanted. There were a few things that I was discouraged from doing, but basically they were like things that would have been unsafe for anybody. And I was just never, ever growing up was told about limitations or things I might not be able to do as an adult. My parents and my mostly my mother, because my father died when I was very young, just stopped all teachers, relatives, friends from ever having conversations with me about any limitations anybody might have based on eyesight. So I just literally never was in a conversation about that. I never thought about, okay, when you grow up, I can't do this or can't do that. I didn't really think about any of that stuff until I got to the age when all my friends were getting driver's license, and that was clearly beyond me. It's very, very good for the world that I do not have a driver's license. There'd be many, many more dead people all over the place. It would just be a disaster. So it's good I don't have one, but that was the first sort of awakening realization I had that, hey, wait a minute, my life is going to be more limited in that sense.
Right. So I want to expand on that a little bit, because I like that you didn't feel that sense of limitation. Tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, how do you feel that sort of prepared you for life and for your career and for the things that you did take on?
Well, one of the primary differences was geography, where it would be much, much harder for me. I mean, I realize people do it and I admire them, but much, much harder for me to live anywhere other than an urban area that has good mass transit and it's easy to get around, where you can walk to most things. You can take mass transit to other things, and if you need to, you can take a cab or an Uber to something farther away. I've lived in all of my life basically in places where some people who see perfectly well and could get a driver's license or have driver's licenses don't have cars, where it's just convenient enough to not have a car. So, like, my wife has a car. I mean, not has a car. She has a driver's license. She does not have a car. And once every I don't know, 8 months or something, we rent a car and go somewhere for the weekend, or when we're on a vacation, we rent a car and she drives. But that's it. We live in a place where it's easy enough. I lived in New York City most of my life. People love to complain about whatever mass transit and they have in their city, but the New York City subway system, even though it's over 100 years old, it's easy to get around, and it goes almost everywhere. There's the whole train network outside the city. I live in Melbourne, Australia now. It's got the biggest tram network in the world, and it's also got a big train network. It's just a tremendous place to live, both places.
Excellent. Yeah, and that definitely helps a lot. I know that when I lost my own vision, and having to shift from being able to drive to relying on other modes, I know in the early days I actually used my feet a lot more. And then I thought, hey, if I got the time to walk, I'll walk. But it is definitely nice to have that mass transit and to be able to use those things to get around. And I don't know about you. Well, I guess if you've never had the chance, maybe you didn't have to endure this, but even through your wife, the challenges of winter driving or commuting or even road rage, it's kind of nice not to have to deal with those things.
Well, exactly. I've never, come anywhere close to experiencing that. She's used to it, but she's correctly sort of a little bit annoyed at me, because a lot of times when we're driving somewhere, I just go to sleep. I'm in the front seat, but I'm really all that helpful of navigating. I'll put the stuff on my phone of where we're going, and so we can listen to and watch the directions. But I, half the time I'm asleep. So it's just, I just view it as, nothing's going on. I might as well relax, So,
Right.
But I think it also points to an advantage of poor vision, where you do probably, those of us with poor vision probably do walk around much more than people who just jump in the car and go everywhere. So you get accidentally a nice additional amount of exercise. I always am a little reluctant to count walking as exercise. I feel like that's not really enough, right? It could be running or doing something in the gym, or whatever you like to do. But nevertheless, walking is way better than sitting in your car. So you get that extra plus, and then you also, we also walk farther than other people because we just miss stuff. We don't see the sign. We walk farther. We go past something. We don't see the elevators. We can't find them, so we take the stairs. And so we end up getting more exercise, which I think all of that leads to a healthier and longer life. It's a side advantage.
I kind of like that. I think I'm going to start posting that out somewhere. Blind people live longer because we're in better shape.
I think so. Well, and other reasons to live longer too. We avoid. We're not doing certain things that we might be inclined to do that could shorten our life. In my case, I briefly tried parachuting, and then my eye doctor pointed out, well, wait a minute. If you've had a detached retina in each eye, if you have a big knock to the head, which could happen in parachuting, you could lose the vision in those eyes. So I said, all right, well, I had to give up parachuting. But so you give up some things that might be a little dangerous. So you might live longer because of that. The other thing is, if you have poor vision like us, then you're more interested and more likely to read news about, medical improvements and vision improvements and health. And right next to those articles are all kinds of other related articles about, hey, do this for your health, do this for your diet, do this for exercise. Well, just because, and so you sort of veer off and you read a bunch of those, or you listen to them on YouTubes or watch them on YouTubes, and, you end up absorbing this other health stuff, and you probably live longer because of that as well.
yeah, sort of take some unintended advice, I guess.
Exactly. And then you're accidentally interested in it.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh, hey, I think I could do that. I think I'll give that a go. I do want to ask you a little bit more about that skydiving though, because so I'm going to tell you that I'm afraid of heights, and I went to go skydiving once. This is back in, before my sight loss, but I went to go skydiving once, and it was only 3,000 feet, but and it wasn't a tandem jump; it was a solo. Like for my very first jump, they basically pull my cord and I'm gone. But I have to admit, I actually I got scared. I didn't do it. I sort of, as they were getting my chute ready, I kind of glanced out of the plane and saw how far down the 3,000 feet really was, and went, you know what? I don't think I'm doing this today. And I went and sat in the back of the plane. So I gotta tell you,
I don't think there's any shame or embarrassment about that. There's no point doing something you don't want to do. It's not for everybody, that's for sure. On the other hand, I was very, very glad I did it. I thought it was a ton of fun. The group of people I went with, the vast majority of them did it once, and that was it. They were never, ever going to do it again. It was just like, they did not want to go a second or third or whatever. They just, all right, I was terrified. I did it. I can say I did it. It's off my bucket list, and boom, that was it. They were done.
Right. Well, you know what, and I can agree with that thinking. Not only from my near attempt at skydiving, that was my one and only experience with a bungee jump. Was I did it once. It scared the living daylights out of me. Luckily, I have the pictures because I blacked out in the experience.
Wow.
So I'm with those people that you're talking about. Did it once, don't need to do it again. I think I'm good.
Blacking out in a bungee jump, like, all right, you bounce up and down on the cord, but you're okay. But if you blacked out while you were parachuting, you're not going to know whether you're aiming for trees. You're not going to know whether you're aiming for electric lines. You're not going to know whether you're aiming for a highway, or you'll have no idea. That could be extremely dangerous.
I think you're right, and having known that about my bungee jump experience, but I do other moderately adventurous things with my fear, even though I think I have a fear of heights. I did the CN Tower edge walk, and I hung off the edge of the CN Tower in Toronto, which, until the tower in Dubai took its place, it was the tallest structure in the world. So it was, I'll do that again in a heartbeat. So if you're ever in Toronto, I'll meet you there and we'll go do it.
Well, it sounds like a plan. I'd like to try that, I think.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool deal.
It looks like, it'd be exciting.
Yeah, it was a pretty neat experience. I want to go back to something you were talking about, and just talking about the walking around and stuff like that. Because one of the things I did notice in the book is that you don't talk about using a white cane or a monocular or sort of any of the tools that people with sight loss typically use. So I'm curious about that. Was that a conscious decision, or nobody ever sort of talked to you about it? How did that go?
I've been lucky enough and very thankful in my vision. I've not had to use anything like that. I wore glasses most of my life, very thick glasses, and then I was able to switch to contact lenses. And then after that, I had cataract operation, so the lenses are actually embedded in your eyes when you have a cataract operation. So that's all I've really needed, except I use reading glasses sometimes on top of that. And also I use a large monitor for reading. But I can walk around and jog and all of that. All of that is fine. So I'm lucky in that sense. I do think, though, that it sometimes you're walking along, and I think this is another advantage of poor eyesight, is I think we have we have people with poor vision have better balance just in walking around or jogging, where you're going along and you can't really exactly see the height of what you're about to step on, especially if it's is that a leaf or is that a shadow or is that a spill or is that water or what is that, a hole? What is that? Or is it a bump or whatever? Well, you're never really sure, and you just have to go for it all the time anyway. You just keep walking along or jogging along. So you're used to jogging or walking where you don't know exactly the depth at which your feet are going to land. About, but you don't know exactly, and it gives you better balance, I think.
Yeah, I guess. Again, you're doing it. You're finding the positive to it.
Yeah.
I remember myself in the early days of my sight loss. I went out for a little walk, and I was out for a walk with my spouse. And as we were walking down the sidewalk, she wondered what I was doing because I was sort of stepping in weird ways. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, there's these spots all over the sidewalk. I don't know, what is this? I don't want to step on it. I don't know what it is." And she said, "Oh, well, it's the leaves that have fallen." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm good with stepping on, but they were just little black dots on the sidewalk to me at the time. And I'm like, I don't know I don't know if I want to step on this or not. I don't know what this is.
Well, exactly. And then you just build up. It's like going anywhere. You build up, a level of boldness. You don't know exactly where you're stepping when you walk out the door, or you're looking for something, or you're just walking around. Everybody else is seeing things better, and you've got to go out. You got to do stuff. You've got to go for it, even though you don't see it as well. So you're bold, every day in the sense of going out and not knowing exactly what you're getting into. And then, if you do that your whole life or a big chunk of your life, it's only a tiny additional step to being brave, where, all right, what you're getting into, it might be challenging and adventurous or dangerous or exciting, but you go anyway. It's only a little tiny step between bold and brave. And we're there.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think it's true, right? You just go for it, because otherwise, your other choice is to sit at home and stay at home and do nothing. And
yeah, exactly.
And you don't strike me as a do nothing sort of guy. So,
well, thank you. And you neither. Yeah.
Well, and based on some of the things that I read, I mean, the time that you tried to catch a mugger with your buddy, I mean, or catch the thief. Sorry, it wasn't a mugger. It was a thief stealing your friend's radio. I mean, you didn't stop and think, hey, should I chase this guy? Is it safe for me? You got in the chase.
Oh, yeah. Should I tell that story?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I have he and I are still good friends. We met in second grade, literally. My family moved from Pennsylvania to Connecticut in the U.S. And my first day of school, he and I got in a fight, which to this day we both think we won. So that's perfect. And we've been friends ever since. And it's just tremendous to be really good friends with somebody for so long. So we were in junior high school and high school. We were on cross country and track teams together and everything else. And then we both moved to New York City, and we both have jobs, and we're both on this particular night in business suits, tie and jacket and suit and everything, and business shoes. And we were out and we were having a million beers. It's a weeknight. We're going to work the next day, but it's New York City. We're in our 20s or 30s. We're out having a great time. So then we're completely done, which means we think we've had enough beers, which was probably a ton of them by then. And we're walking back towards the general location where his car was, and also my apartment was nearby. His apartment was also nearby. I don't actually remember why we were going. I don't know why his car wasn't at his apartment. But anyway, we're going there, and all of a sudden, And now it's late at night, right? All of a sudden, my friend John, he starts sprinting. Doesn't say a word. He just starts sprinting. So, all right, I've known him forever. I don't know what's going on. So I start sprinting. And I look behind. I don't see anybody, you know, and so we're sprinting along. And then I get close enough to see what he had seen is somebody robbing his car. And so I realized, wait a minute, this is good. We're not being chased, because I had no idea why anybody would be chasing us anyway. We are chasing this guy. We're trying to catch this thief. So the thief takes off. He goes east, and no, he goes west. And then we follow him. So we're all on the sidewalk running hard. Although John and I are not running nearly as well as we would have had we been in, you know, running shoes and track stuff and hadn't been out all night drinking beers. You know, we're in our suits, we're in, you know, dress shoes. You know, it's like, this is not the ideal running situation. But anyway, we're running. The guy cuts into the street. John cuts into the street after him. Now I'm parallel to the thief, and I'm looking over at him, and I miss. Somebody had thrown a mattress out onto the sidewalk. And so I run and I trip on the mattress, and I'm really going fairly fast, and I'm up in the air, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is really going to hurt, because I'm up in the air flying, and then I land on the sidewalk and smash into some metal garbage bins that are on the sidewalk, and you know. So they keep running, of course, and they take a right and they start going up one of the avenues. So it takes me a couple seconds to recover, but by the time I recover, like I go around and go up the avenue, and I could see them running, and then they took a right someplace, and I couldn't tell where they took a right. So I run and I look down each street, and I don't see him, I don't see him, and I don't see him. And so I go up 5 blocks, and I say, all right, I don't know where they are. I'm going to just take a right and go for a while. So I'm sprinting, and now I'm really, really out of breath. And I'm going along, and then the police stop me because they think I'm the guy, right? So I'm up against the car, and they think I've stolen the stuff. And I'm so out of breath, I can't talk, I can't say anything. You know, I'm just going. And then they hear something over their radio, and they say, oh, you can go. So I don't know what they heard. And they just say, you can go. They don't tell me anything. So I figure, all right, what am I going to do? All right, I'll go back sort of the opposite way in case they circled around. I go back down the avenue. And now I'll tell you where my friend John chased the thief. He was chasing him. A bicycle rider joined him. So both of them are yelling, call the cops, call the cops, call the cops. They chase this guy over to another avenue. They go up. John catches the guy, but he's so exhausted that the guy gets away. He escapes his grasp, and he gets away. So he starts chasing again. The bicycle guy starts chasing again. The thief throws his bag of tools, which included John's radio, the car radio, into some bushes. A doorman sees that, calls the cops, and reports, and says, "Here's these tools. This guy just threw this away." They chase him almost back to where we started, and then John catches him again, and this time he holds him, and then the police come, right? So I come down the avenue a little just after that point, and I don't see John, and all I see is the thief in the middle of a whole bunch of people. So I sprint, and I do what might be the best jump I've ever done by far in my life, right? I jump high, really high. My hips are shoulder height to all these people that are surrounding this guy. And I'm yelling at that guy, and I have my arms up, and I'm like this. And then as I'm at the height of my jump, I realize, oh, wait a minute. all these guys are cops, and they very quickly had their batons and guns out, because like, here's some guy, me, who they never saw before, is just jumping up on top of them. And so luckily, my friend John, who it turns out was basically kneeling in the middle of the circle next to the thief, he was so out of breath, he hadn't been able to talk very much, but he stands up and goes, no, he was with me. So basically John saved me, right? So I land, and the guy was there, and he was already caught and in the middle of the police. So that was really good. So then the thief actually threw up on some policemen, which did not help his case. And it turns out later that his fingerprints were all over the place in other robberies. You know, his fingerprints were on the tools. We didn't even need to go to court to testify. They had so much evidence to confess to everything. So that was really good. And then we realized, oh, wait a minute. John's car is still open. Let's run back there and make sure it's okay. So we start running again, and we go back, and then this time going on the exact same sidewalk. Very embarrassingly, I trip over the same mattress. I'm going the opposite direction. I'm in the air, and this time I'm thinking, this is so embarrassing. So I land, again on the sidewalk. I'm in it was a bad night for my suit, that's for sure. So anyway, get up, we go to the car. Nothing else was wrong with the car. Everything was okay, just the radio. And eventually, John got his radio back, and it was good. But by now, it's early morning. So, he went back to his apartment. I went back to my apartment. We both went to work, and we're basically not good for anything that day at work, because we'd been up all night. But we had this story. So we both spent the entire day telling our work colleagues, and I was a consultant, so my clients, this story, and the whole thing was great. So we made New York a safer place that night. I like to think I participated and helped, but I'm not so sure. But anytime the subject comes up, John insists that I was essential to the story. So he's a very, very good friend in that sense. So according to him, I did help. So there we go.
Well, and I'm going to say that you did help as well, because I think the biggest thing that came out of it from your perspective and from my perspective as a reader and listening to your story, you're the reporter. You were the news reporter following the guy, right? Who needed, most days now they're using a chopper to follow all of these things. You were just right there on the scene, man. So you're. I think you are integral to the story, being able to tell it. I like
that because now it's in the book. So you've got it's memorialized, so it can go down in John's history.
Well, and as a friend once told me after I wrote my first book, he said, you know what? Now that you've put it out there in print, he said it's going to be here long after you. Like somebody's going to read that story years from now, and it'll always be there, even when you're not telling it anymore, because you've probably moved on to some other adventure. But I have to say, as I was reading the story and listening to you tell it again, I'm thinking, like dress shoes and a suit, not exactly what the track teams are wearing in school. So good on you guys for being able to pull that off, because I don't think many people would actually be able to keep the stamina up to run in full business attire.
Well, on the one hand, yes. On the other hand, what does that say about the kind of shape the thief was in?
Well, I guess, right? Well, maybe he's had to run from a lot of people many times.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, right. Ken, I have to ask you, this is a question that I'm often asked, and so I'm just going to share this with you too. One of the questions that I'm often asked when I do presentations and such is people talk to me about, okay, so you lost your eyesight, did your other senses kick in automatically? And the response that I often give them as well. As much as our brains are really good at letting us live and having our bodies function, the one thing they don't do very well is a system check to say, oh, the sight's not working, I better ramp up the hearing and the touch and all the other senses. But you in the book, you talk about also like the joys of experiencing the world through those other senses. Can you share a little of that? One story that springs to mind?
Sure. I think I don't think your other senses actually get better, but you learn to pay more attention. You hopefully learn over time to pay more attention to them, and it's to your advantage. I know personally several times, I was saved from being hit by a car because I heard the car that I didn't see. So there's many more, joyous things related to paying attention to the other senses. Just romance by itself, how good is smell and touch and being so close to somebody, how great is that, but I'll tell you one where I should have been paying much, much more attention to my other senses, in this case, smell. Mm-hmm. I lived, actually, the apartment I was going back to in that other story was on the 5th floor of a walk-up building, meaning there's no elevator. You had to walk up to the apartment. So 4 flights of stairs up to the apartment. So when you live in one of those apartments, you really get to know what kind of shape everybody is in. Some people, they sort of jog up and they're feeling very proud of themselves just to make it up. And you think, all right, that's good, that's good. Other people, between the time you buzz them in the front door and the time they get up there, you could go to the movies and, and then they're exhausted and they need to rest for half an hour after they get there. I wake up one morning in that apartment and it was a little tiny studio apartment, very small, right? So I'm in bed and I look across the room to the far side of the apartment, which is only 8 feet away or something. And I cannot see the wall. And it wasn't because of a vision issue. I'm thinking to myself, oh, it sure is smoggy in here. You literally couldn't see the wall. It was so full of what I thought was smog. Then I go back to sleep. That was it. I was not paying attention to my sense of smell. Seconds, maybe minutes, I don't know how long later, my neighbor, one of my neighbors, there are 4 studio apartments on the 5th floor, is banging on the door, doing what I should have done if I was paying attention. Going, fire, fire. It's banging on everybody's door, helping everybody in the building, alerting people. I wake up, I get dressed faster than I probably have ever gotten dressed in my life because my entire apartment is filled with smoke. Of course, it's not smog. You never have smog indoors. It doesn't make any sense. But it was really, really unbelievably full of black, dark smoke. So it was pretty scary. I didn't know. It's a building on fire. What's going on? So I go outside to the landing, and my neighbor's out there, and we're about to go downstairs to get out of the building. But up the stairs runs this firefighter, this fireman, and he's got all his heavy stuff on, his heavy uniform, his heavy boots. He's carrying an axe. He's got his heavy helmet on. He's got his oxygen tank on his back. And he says, as he's sprinting up the stairs, he says, just like this. I'm not kidding. Could you 2 guys give me a lift, a boost over the wall between this building and the next building? He says it just like that. Neither of us had ever heard anything before or since where somebody could speak like that while sprinting up the stairs with all that stuff. So of course we say yes. So instead of going out of the building, we go up 1 flight to the roof with him, and we give him a boost over this brick wall between our 2 buildings. And I was glad my neighbor was there. This guy was heavy, so I'm glad there were 2 of us. We give him a boost, and his job was to take his axe and smash an opening in the roof of the building so that some of the heat and flames could escape while his buddies were fighting the fire from fire trucks and from the ground below. So we hear him smashing, and then we say, well, all right, let's look and see what's going on. So we go walk, we're on the roof. We walk to the back of the building. When the back of the building faced a place that's sort of a courtyard where a bunch of different buildings faced it. And for some reason, the way the wind was going, this smoke is just pouring out of this next door building to us, which was, it turned out it was an arson. It had been set on fire. It was an abandoned building. And the smoke is pouring out and doing a U-turn and coming right through our building. So, you know, why was that happening? How did that work aerodynamically? Who knows? But it was good, because then we thought, all right, that's good. Our building is not on fire. It's just a building next door. So I said, well, let's look at the front. The back is really interesting. So we walked to the front of the roof. We looked down, and there are all these fire trucks and firefighters, and ladder fire trucks and hose fire trucks, and people on ladders with hoses, and people running, firefighters running into the building, all kinds of activity. And one guy who's a firefighter is wearing a white helmet, and he's got a bullhorn, and he yells up at us. He sees us and he goes, "You idiots, get off the roof and out of the building." Well, he had a good point there. We really probably shouldn't have been there. So we went back, and my neighbor left right away. I figured, all right, our building is safe. I have time to take a quick shower, and I changed and left and went to work. But the big lesson I took out of that was, hey, pay attention to your other senses, especially smell. It can definitely save your life. If it was our building and I had just fallen asleep thinking it was smog, why was I thinking that? It should have been alerting up and helping to warn my neighbors like my neighbor did. I don't know whether that counts as an advantage or an adventure, but I like the story.
I think it counts as a bit of both. Well, actually, I think it counts as an adventure for sure, and maybe just one of those life lessons that you'll call an advantage later. It's like, oh yeah, I'll use the smell a little more. Okay, yeah.
I think there's it's not like nothing was wrong with my nose. I just wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, right. You gotta switch it on once in a while and use it a little bit more.
Smell the roses,
I like
they say.
I think it was a right. Yeah, and it's well, and that's one of the things that I had experienced very early on in my sight loss. Again, walking down that same street where I saw it was trying to avoid all the leaves. That street, I was living in Toronto at the time, and it was lined with maple trees. And it was the middle of summertime, and I could actually smell the maple on the trees. Like it blew my mind that that my nose had sort of tuned in, and I could smell the maple on the trees. And I love maple. I love the smell of maple, so it was a great experience. It was
well, and it's such a cool thing because it adds this whole other level of enjoyment to walking around. That it's easy to like skip and not pay attention to, but you go by stuff. I'm sure you'd been by a billion maple trees prior to that, and it's not that you didn't like it or you didn't like the smell. It's just you weren't paying any attention. And the same thing with all kinds of other great trees and bushes and flowers and acres and all kinds of other stuff. It's fun to walk by them and smell them.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely have to agree with that. I think you're 100% right. You don't necessarily tune into it until you have these. Well, until, like you said, you stop and smell the roses a little bit. Or in my case, the maple tree, but whatever floats your boat. Sort of through the book, I noticed that you sprinkled sort of little advice about, be nice to people, be considerate, be a little bit more open to what might be going on there. So I suppose I want to ask you, like, big picture, what are you thinking? What are you hoping people take from the book as the message?
Well, I think possibly the passage you mentioned, just part of what you were alluding to, there's a very small part of the book where I was talking about some of the advantages of paying attention to hearing and the joys related to that. But as a sort of a side note in there, I had said that people who we may have, and it's sad that there's an advantage here, but the people who have poor vision, you can get into confusing situations and there's all kinds of challenges and everything, but nobody really gets angry at you because you have poor vision. They might not realize it first or whatever, but nobody gets angry at you. On the other hand, if you have a tough time hearing, a lot of times people, they don't just speak louder or figure out a different way to communicate. They actually yell and get angry sometimes, which doesn't make any sense, and if they stop to think about it even for a second, they wouldn't do it. But it just happens where people they get yelled at because they have difficulty hearing. They need the louder voice, but people don't just speak louder, they yell, and in my book I say, that's a shame. Just try to be nice to everybody. There's no excuse for that. It somehow happens, and it's sad that it happens. So that's where that came from, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's a really important point to raise. I mean, I think it is. And it doesn't matter that your book is mostly about sight, and then you sort of went on a bit of a, you started raising the flag a little bit for people with hearing loss. It's just another one of the senses that sometimes fails us.
It's one paragraph in there, but that seemed to resonate actually with a lot of people. So you never know what parts of the book people are find the most interesting or some.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, right? It's like a musician putting out an album. You don't know which songs people are going to attach to, right? And speaking of which, actually, I want to ask you a little bit about this. So tell me about your trumpet playing. Are you still playing?
Yes. Major interruptions as a result of COVID. Where I live in Melbourne, Australia, there's been actually more lockdown than any other place in the world, literally. So the band and rehearsals and practices and performances have all been canceled for a long time. And then we had, breaks where, all right, wait, we're out. Oh, no, we're back. Oh, we're out. No, we're back. But anyway, I'm an amateur jazz trumpeter. I think it's a ton of fun. I don't want to in any sense overstate my ability, but my enjoyment is very good. And it's fun to practice at home by yourself, but it's way, way, way more fun to play with other people. And that's what has largely been missing for a lot of the last few years. And it's changing. It's, we're coming out of lockdown. So that's, that'll be different, but pretty much it's a safety factor, like if you, like everything about social distancing and not breathing on each other and everything, you take a whole bunch of trumpets and wind instruments and you're aiming at each other and playing. That's pretty much exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to do during a pandemic. So it was correct that we weren't able to play together, but now that we're starting to be able to, it's really fun.
That's good. I'm glad you're going to be able to get back to it soon. I know over here we're still dealing with some restrictions a little bit, and just in the last 2 weeks, 3 shows that my wife and I were getting ready to go see have all been postponed to a later date, just because of what we're still going through. In fact, one of them I just found out about an hour before you and I started talking. It's like, oh, okay, I guess we're not doing anything this weekend. But that's just what we're in right now.
Safety first. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I'm all for it. I've been working from home. I've been keeping my distance and doing all the things that I've been asked to do. Hopefully I tend to have a pretty good immune system, but maybe my wife doesn't, and so I gotta not bring it home so that she doesn't get it, and
Well,
that's the way I look.
the other thing, it's not good to, you feel bad saying anything positive about the pandemic, but I basically wrote my book and then narrated the audio version of it during the pandemic, and it was a great time to actually do those kinds of activities because of exactly what you're saying. You're limited socially. You're not going out to listen to music. You're not going out to listen to speakers. You're not going to friends' houses for parties. You're not doing sports together. You're not doing a whole bunch of stuff. So you're at home, and you really want, when you're writing or narrating, you want, heads down time to concentrate and think and be creative pretty much by yourself. There's times when you want to coordinate with other people and go back and forth with your editor or confirm things with friends and things like that. But a lot of it is just solitary. Writing is a solitary activity. Narrating is almost completely a solitary activity. And they were perfect endeavors during the pandemic. So, not in any sense that I was pro-pandemic, but it was a great time to be doing those things.
And it was good that you sort of had that time made available, because otherwise, your stories might have stayed, in half written form or, much less concise form for a few more years yet. Right. So you were presented
Exactly.
with a bit of an opportunity, and I'm really glad that you took it. Just on the book, there's one last question I want to ask you, and I think this is awesome. Can you talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned that you're donating some of the proceeds to a couple of charities, and I'd love for you to get a plug in there for that.
Okay, I'd be happy to. Yes, I give 10% of my royalties, author royalties, to eye charities. So 5% each. 5% to Massachusetts Eye and Ear, which is a big research hospital in Boston and Massachusetts and nearby. And the reason I picked them is they do tons of great research that helps everybody. Plus, I had my 2 detached retina operations there. And so I would literally be completely blind if it wasn't for the success of those operations. And those were in the early days of detached retina operations. So it was a bit of an experimental operation at the time. And it's really held up perfectly many years later now. And then the second one, I wanted, since I'm an American citizen and an Australian citizen, I wanted to have a charity in each country. So the other 5% goes to the Fred Hollis Foundation, which is based in Australia, but it functions in 26, 27 countries around the world, where they provide help that's available in developed countries to undeveloped countries or poor areas of developed countries, where to actually save people's sight, like operations or medication or providing cataracts, the simple kinds of operations and medication where people go from being completely blind to being sighted. They've done literally millions of those, changing people's lives, changing the lives of their families and their friends. It's a colossal ongoing operation that they've got going. And so it's really fun to be able to support both of those organizations.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I really applaud you for doing that. And I think you were the first to do the good deed by putting the book out there as a tool that people can, read your story and donate, sort of through you. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. I, 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 I think that's a wonderful thing. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
What a great guy and a fun conversation. I absolutely enjoyed that, and thank you again to Ken for giving me some of his time to talk about his book and his story. If you want to find out more about Ken's book, Positive Vision, Enjoying the Adventures and Advantages of Poor Eyesight, you can find it in print, ebook, or audiobook at any of the places where you would normally find your favorite books. Or you can also find it on his website at kenbrandt.com. That's KenBrandt.com. And I'll put that link down in the description for this video. Thanks very much for watching today. I really do appreciate each and every one of you who watches these videos. Thank you so much for doing so. And I hope you have a wonderful day.